The city of Detroit had forgotten about Sector 9 long ago. Once a proud industrial district filled with factories, it had now rotted into a wasteland of flickering neon signs, boarded up windows, and the constant hum of sirens in the distance. At the corner of East Monroe Street stood a fading relic of a dream, the Rusted Leaf Cafe and Bookstore. Inside, a woman knelt on the sticky floor, her trembling hands scrubbing at a dark puddle of soda. "Get on your knees and clean it up, old witch," sneered Derek Morello, his voice sharp and mocking. His polished shoe nudged the puddle closer to her fingers, splashing across the edges of her apron. Two massive men in black shirts, Derek's hired muscle, laughed behind him, the sound low and cruel, like hyenas circling a wounded animal. Nadia Reeve didn't flinch. The 46-year-old owner of the cafe looked fragile. Her gray-streaked hair pulled into a tired bun, her shoulders slumped under years of invisible weight. To the world, she was a failed small-town woman trying to survive in a dying part of the city. But her eyes, cold, watchful, unblinking, told a different story. "Maybe next time," Derek said, leaning closer until his breath brushed her cheek, "you'll remember who runs this block. You pay what's due, or we burn this dump to the ground." He grabbed a handful of her hair and yanked her head back, forcing her to look into his eyes. "Look at me when I talk to you." The rag in Nadia's hand froze mid-motion. For half a second, something dangerous flickered in her gaze. Something ancient, trained, and far deadlier than the boy standing over her. Then it vanished just as quickly, replaced by the dull submission of a woman broken by fear. "Good," Derek hissed. "That's the look I like." Helpless, he threw her to the ground, straightened his leather jacket, and turned toward the door. His goons followed, laughing and shoving each other as they left the cafe, in ruins. The bell above the door chimed once, a strangely gentle sound, before silence swallowed the room again. Nadia stayed on her knees for a long time, staring at the spilled drink creeping across the tiles. Her back ached, but her mind was moving, methodical, sharp, calculating. Every detail was stored away. Derek's new tattoo, the make of his car, the cheap cologne he used to hide the smell of cocaine. On the shelf beside her lay an untouched book, its title half hidden beneath the grime, The Art of War. Nadia reached for it, brushing her fingers along the cover like one might touch an old friend. Her reflection in the glass door stared back at her. A middle-aged woman, with no power, no protection, but deep inside that reflection, behind those calm gray eyes, something stirred, a predator remembering what it used to be. The city thought Nadia Reeve was finished. Derek Morello thought she was harmless. They were all about to learn what it meant to wake the ghost of Sector 9. The rain came that night, slow, heavy, and merciless, drumming on the roof of the Rusted Leaf Cafe like the ticking of a war clock. Nadia Reeve sat alone behind the counter, a cup of untouched coffee cooling beside her. To anyone passing by, she looked like just another tired woman losing her battle against life. But beneath the surface, a storm was gathering, one that had nothing to do with the weather. There was a time when the name Spectre could silence entire rooms inside the CIA's Special Activities Division. A ghost in human form. An operative who never missed, never hesitated, and never left witnesses. For nearly 2 decades, that ghost had been Nadia Reeve. She'd operated in shadows that even the agency denied existed. Her missions spanned continents, sabotaging black market arms routes through Eastern Europe, infiltrating terrorist networks in North Africa, dismantling a narcotics syndicate inside the Mexican cartels. The stories about her were legend, whispered only in code. A woman who could kill a man with a paperclip and disappear into the crowd before his body hit the ground. But legends, no matter how deadly, eventually grow old. After her partner, and only friend, was killed during a botched extraction in Istanbul, Nadia had walked away. She told herself she was done, that she wanted peace, that she could live like an ordinary person. Then came Operation Rust, her so-called retirement mission. Simple, the agency said. Go deep undercover in Detroit. Pose as a struggling shopkeeper. Keep tabs on Vincent Morello, the aging mob patriarch quietly turning the city's decaying sectors into his personal empire. No direct engagement, no violence, just surveillance. A milk run, they called it. But what the agency never understood was that peace isn't something people like Nadia can keep. The ghosts she carried never slept. They only waited. Every morning for 11 months, she opened her cafe at 7 a.m. sharp. She smiled at regulars, brewed coffee, and stocked shelves. But her eyes never stopped scanning. Every reflection in the window was a potential threat. Every customer's hand position, every footstep, every sound. Processed, analyzed, memorized. It wasn't paranoia. It was muscle memory. She saw Derek Morello long before he noticed her. The swagger, the expensive sneakers, the empty eyes of a boy who thought cruelty made him powerful. He was exactly the kind of animal she'd been trained to exterminate. Careless, arrogant, and predictable. When Derek's father's men began forcing local businesses to pay community tax, she reported everything to her CIA handler, Ethan Cross. His response came over an encrypted line 2 weeks later. Stay low. Keep collecting. Don't engage. That was the problem with bureaucrats. They thought monsters could be documented, not destroyed. Nadia leaned back in her chair, staring at the dark reflection in the cafe window. The reflection of a woman pretending to be weak. The city had forgotten the ghost called Spectre, but the ghost hadn't forgotten how to kill. The next morning, the sun clawed weakly through Detroit's gray haze, painting Sector 9 in the color of exhaustion. The Rusted Leaf Cafe opened on time, as always, but Nadia Reeves' hands moved slower than usual. She wasn't tired. She was thinking. Every sound, every flicker of light in the street outside felt sharper, closer, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. It didn't take long. At exactly 9:17 a.m., the door swung open with a metallic clang. Derek Morello strolled in like a king, entering his throne room, trailed by 3 of his slab-shouldered enforcers. He had a new tattoo snaking up his neck, a serpent devouring its own tail. The symbolism wasn't lost on Nadia. Monsters like him always ended up consuming themselves. Well, well, Derek grinned, dropping his cigarette onto the clean floor and grinding it beneath his shoe. The old lady's still open for business. Guess I didn't make myself clear last time. Nadia looked up from behind the counter. Her tone was calm, almost polite. You were perfectly clear, Mr. Morello. I just don't take orders from children. The laughter that followed was ugly. One of the goons picked up a porcelain mug, examined it, then hurled it against the wall. It exploded into white dust. Careful, Derek said, smirking. You break too many of those, she'll start crying. Nadia didn't cry. She didn't move. She simply watched, calculating, counting. 3 men, one with a limp, one favoring his right hand, one with a nervous blink, meth addict. She could kill them all before the mug shards hit the floor. But not yet. Derek sauntered toward the back wall, stopping at a small shelf that held a single framed photograph. It showed a younger Nadia standing beside a tall man with calm eyes and a CIA field badge half hidden beneath his collar. Jonathan Righ, her husband, her partner, the only person who'd ever understood what it meant to live as a weapon. He had died 10 years ago during an extraction gone wrong in Istanbul. Derek lifted the photo, studied it, then smiled the way only true cowards smile. He drew a red marker from his jacket and pressed its tip to the glass, dragging it slowly across Jonathan's face, a crude, blood-colored X. Then he nailed the picture to the wooden counter with a rusted knife he pulled from his boot. Now it looks better, he said softly. The cafe went dead quiet. Even the hum of the old fridge seemed to stop. Nadia's eyes rested on the photo, the red ink bleeding down the glass like a wound. Something inside her, something she had chained, drugged, buried, shifted. When she finally looked at Derek, her expression hadn't changed, but her eyes had. The warmth was gone, replaced by the cold, mechanical focus of the killer the CIA had once unleashed across half the globe. "Get out," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek laughed. "Or what, Grandma?" Nadia's grip on the counter tightened until her knuckles turned white. "Or the ghost you just woke up." She said quietly, "We'll come for you." That night, she locked the cafe doors early. The city outside slept in restless silence. Inside, Nadia Righ opened a false panel beneath the stairs and stared at the steel case buried there, a relic of her past life. The lid opened with a soft click. Inside lay her old CIA field kit. Spectre was back. Detroit's night was alive with sirens and distant thunder when Nadia Righ began to move. Upstairs, in the small apartment above the Rusted Leaf Cafe, she stripped away the disguise of a broken shopkeeper. Gone were the sagging sweaters, the soft jeans, the timid posture. In their place stood something else, straight-backed, efficient, lethal. The woman in the mirror was no longer Nadia the bookstore owner. She was Spectre, the CIA's forgotten phantom. The first thing she did was open the steel case. Inside was a world the agency thought she'd buried, a compact 9mm SIG, a tactical knife with a black carbon handle, and an encrypted tablet marked only with the faded emblem of the Special Activities Division. Every weapon had been cleaned monthly, every file kept current. She had never truly retired. She had simply been waiting for the right moment. That moment had come. She laid out the floor plan of her cafe, every inch memorized from the years she'd run it. Her fingers traced paths on the blueprint, choke points, blind angles, and kill zones disguised as cozy reading corners. The cafe's decor, its bookshelves and soft lighting, would now serve as a battlefield. One by one, she set tiny micro cameras the size of shirt buttons into the light fixtures. She placed miniature microphones inside hollowed-out book spines and beneath the counter drawers. The sugar dispenser became a surveillance hub. The napkin holder concealed a transmitter. It was a one-woman war room. At 2 a.m., a faint knock sounded at the back door. Nadia's hand went to her gun, but when she peered through the slit, she saw a familiar face. Jack Rayner, a grizzled veteran and her only real friend in the neighborhood. His leg brace glinted under the security light. "Jesus, Nadia," he said when she opened the door, his eyes scanning the gear scattered across the table. "What the hell are you planning?" She met his gaze. "Insurance." Jack let out a slow whistle. "This about that punk Derek? I saw him and his boys across the street tonight, drinking and laughing. They think they run this place." "They think wrong," she replied flatly. Jack hesitated, then nodded. "You'll need help." "No," Nadia said. "You'll need to keep your camera ready." She slid a small recording device into his palm. "Tomorrow, you'll know when to start filming." As he left, she turned to the cafe window. Outside, the neon sign buzzed weakly, the letter R flickering on and off like a heartbeat. Her eyes followed it for a long moment. Then she whispered to herself, "Let them come." Meanwhile, across town, in a smoky penthouse suite, Vincent Morello was lecturing his son. "You're making too much noise, Derek. This city is business, not play." But Derek only smirked, nursing a bruise on his neck. "Relax, Dad. She's just an old woman." Vincent's sharp eyes narrowed. "Then make sure she stays dead." Back at the Rusted Leaf, Nadia stood beneath the humming lights, the faint blue glow of her encrypted tablet reflecting off her eyes. On its screen was a new file titled Operation Clean Sweep. Tomorrow night, Sector 9 would remember why Spectre was feared in every corner of the world. The following night, Detroit's Sector 9 sank into a damp, electric silence. Streetlights flickered in and out. Graffiti shimmered in puddles, and thunder crawled across the sky like a slow countdown. Inside the Rusted Leaf Cafe, every light was off except one dim bulb above the counter. Nadia Reeves sat beneath it, motionless, like a statue carved out of discipline and rage. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. She'd been ready since sunset. Cameras synced, mics armed. The SIG lay within reach, but she didn't plan to use it unless she had to. This wasn't about killing. It was about exposing, about showing monsters that the woman they tried to break was the one they should have feared all along. At exactly 9:03 p.m., she heard the heavy engine of an approaching vehicle. Then came the laughter, loud, crude, and full of the kind of arrogance only men born into power ever carried. The cafe door burst open, the bell clanging wildly. "Evening, sweetheart," Derek Morello shouted, swaggering inside with 6 men at his back. They fanned out across the room, bats and metal pipes dangling from their fists like toys. "You got my payment ready? Or are we doing things the hard way tonight?" Nadia didn't rise from her chair. Her face was unreadable, her hands folded neatly on the counter. "It's a public place," she said calmly. "If you came to talk, talk." Derek chuckled, spinning a bat in his hand. "You're cute when you pretend to have options." His voice filled the cafe. "Boys, give her a little motivation." 2 of them began sweeping mugs and books off the shelves, smashing everything they touched. A third spray-painted vulgar symbols across the wall. The sound of shattering glass and dripping paint mingled into chaos. In the corner, a faint red light blinked. One of Nadia's hidden cameras capturing every move, every word, every threat. Derek leaned closer, his grin wide. "Maybe you're deaf, lady. I said pay up or burn." He slammed his bat onto the counter with a thunderous crack. That was the trigger. Nadia stood, slowly, deliberately, and in that motion, something shifted. The stooped, timid posture was gone. Her shoulders squared. Her eyes turned to ice. "You should have walked away, Derek." "What the hell did you just—" He never finished. Nadia's hand snatched the coffee pot, and in one perfect arc, she flung its boiling contents across his face. Derek screamed. A raw, animal sound that sliced through the air. Before the others could react, the ghost moved. She ducked beneath a swinging bat, grabbed a thick hardcover novel from the floor, and drove it upward into the attacker's throat. He collapsed, gagging for air. Another lunged. She twisted his wrist until bone cracked, then used his own momentum to hurl him into a bookshelf. A metal napkin holder flew through the air like a silver bullet, connecting with another man's temple. The last thug turned to flee, but Nadia was already behind him, slamming his head into the counter. 27 seconds. That's all it took. Derek lay on the ground, clutching his blistered face, whimpering through clenched teeth. Nadia stood over him, her breathing steady, her expression calm. She pulled a zip tie from her pocket and bound his wrists like she'd done 1,000 times before in darker places. Who are you?" he gasped. She leaned close enough for him to feel her breath. "I'm the last mistake you'll ever make." Across the street, Jack Rayner filmed everything from the shadows, as instructed. His whisper carried through the mic. "Holy hell, she's not human." By the time police sirens echoed down the block, the rusted leaf looked like a war zone, but the war was only beginning. The videos hit the internet before sunrise. Grainy, shaky, raw, but powerful. The world saw an unarmed woman single-handedly dismantle 6 armed men in a bookstore. Within hours, #BookshopGhost trended across every social platform. Headlines screamed, "Detroit woman fights back." The public called her a hero. But heroes don't survive long in a city run by devils. By noon, Vincent Morello was sitting in his penthouse office overlooking the river, a glass of scotch in hand, watching the footage loop again and again. The reflection of Nadia Righ, calm, controlled, unstoppable, glimmered across his face. The memory hit him like a ghost from the past. The way she moved, the precision, the discipline. He had seen that once before, years ago, during a failed arms exchange in Serbia. He turned to his lawyer. "That woman, she's not a civilian." The lawyer swallowed. "We've already filed preliminary charges, sir. Aggravated assault, maybe attempted murder. We're painting her as unstable, violent. Media will eat it up." Vincent smiled, his expression sharp and reptilian. "Good. If we can't break her bones, we'll break her image." That afternoon, the same networks that had hailed Nadia as brave began to shift tone. Paid commentators filled screens with concern. Excessive force, possible racial motive, vigilante violence. By evening, new hashtags appeared: Bookshop Butcher and Justice for Derek. In the hospital, Derek lay swathed in white bandages, his face half covered, his right eye swollen shut. Cameras surrounded his bed. His lawyer stood nearby, reading from a prepared statement. My client and his friends, respected community members, were viciously attacked by a deranged woman who used racial slurs and boiling coffee. They were unarmed. They simply tried to discuss a neighborhood dispute. Derek's voice broke on cue. She said she'd make me scream. The clip went viral within minutes. Overnight, public opinion turned. Protesters lined up outside the Rusted Leaf, waving printed signs, "No to hate crimes," and "Violence isn't justice." From her dark apartment upstairs, Nadia watched it all unfold on the flickering TV. Her hands stayed still, but her jaw tightened with every word. The same people who had cheered her courage were now demanding her arrest. The city she had risked everything to protect was crucifying her with headlines. Then came the knock on the door. 2 uniformed officers stood in the hallway. "Miss Reeve, we have a warrant." Down at the station, her CIA handler, Ethan Cross, met her in a back room, his face pale. "Vincent's got half the city on payroll. Lawyers, judges, cops. You're toxic, Nadia. Langley's calling this a compromised op. They're pulling the plug." Nadia's voice was ice. "You mean they're abandoning it?" Cross exhaled. "I mean you're burned. The agency can't touch this without a political firestorm. Your recordings, your footage, all inadmissible. You're on your own." He stood, hesitated, then added quietly, "You've been in worse places." She stared at him. Not like this. When she returned home, someone had scrawled red paint across her door. "Murderer." For the first time in years, Nadia felt something close to despair. Not fear, not guilt, just the weight of betrayal. But beneath that despair, something else was taking shape. Cold, surgical resolve. They wanted a monster? She would show them one. 3 days later, Detroit's headlines had turned Nadia Reeve into a national villain. The morning talk shows called her a symbol of unchecked rage. Politicians used her name to score cheap points. Every camera wanted a piece of her downfall. But Nadia wasn't hiding. She was planning. From the dim glow of her upstairs apartment, she studied the shifting battlefield like a general before war. Her walls were plastered with screenshots, news segments, tweets, photos of protesters, and the forged police report that turned her act of survival into a hate crime. At the center, taped in red, was a photo of Derek Morello, smiling beneath his hospital bandages. They'd turned the narrative. She would turn it back. Her phone buzzed once. An encrypted line. "Ethan Cross. Langley's washing its hands, Nadia. They're preparing extraction papers. New ID, new life. Take it and disappear." "Not yet," she said flatly. Ethan's voice sharpened. "You break cover, you're finished. You'll go to prison, maybe worse." "Better a cell than silence," she replied, eyes burning with steady fury. "You want to clean your mess? Give me a stage." He hesitated. "A stage?" "I want a town hall," she said, leaning forward. "Public. Broadcast live. Me. Derek. And if Vincent wants to play puppet master, he can sit in the front row." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Jesus Christ, Nadia. This isn't a request," she cut him off. "If the agency won't fight its monsters in the shadows, I'll drag them into the light myself." Silence. Then, "You'll get your stage. But when this goes bad, remember, I tried to stop you." 2 days later, the auditorium at the Detroit Civic Center was packed. Every local station had cameras rolling. Reporters jostled for space near the front. The crowd was a battlefield divided down the middle, half holding signs that read, "Justice for Derek," the other half waving hand-painted boards that said, Let her speak. On the small stage sat 2 tables. One for Derek Morello, pale and pitiful beneath his bandages, and one for the woman he'd called a monster. When Nadia entered, the crowd erupted, a storm of cheers and boos colliding in the same breath. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, just a plain gray blouse and dark slacks. Her face was calm, her spine straight. She looked more like a soldier walking into a tribunal than a defendant seeking mercy. Behind the cameras, Ethan Cross stood near the sound crew, jaw clenched. Everything was wired, not just for the broadcast, but for something else. The agency had approved a secret FISA warrant 48 hours earlier. Every message from Vincent's phone, every encrypted text to his lawyers, every audio call, intercepted. Tonight wasn't just a hearing, it was an ambush. The moderator, a well-known local anchor, began. Ms. Righ, Mr. Morello, tonight is about truth, about accountability. Derek's lawyer smirked. My client has already suffered enough. We expect civility. Nadia folded her hands, her tone almost gentle. Oh, I'll be civil. But the truth won't be. Her gaze locked on Derek's trembling hands. He couldn't look at her. He didn't know yet. But she'd already pulled the first thread of the web he and his father had spun. And before the night ended, the whole thing was going to collapse in flames. The air inside the Detroit Civic Center felt electric, tense enough to snap. Cameras blinked red, microphones hovered like vultures, and every breath in the room seemed to wait for a spark. Nadia Righ sat motionless behind her table, the quiet eye of a brewing storm. Across from her, Derek Morello fidgeted, his bandaged hands trembling as his lawyer whispered instructions. The moderator began with polished professionalism. Mr. Morello, please tell us your version of events. Derek leaned into the microphone, his voice feeble and theatrical. I tried to help her, he said, playing his part to perfection. I wanted to protect our neighborhood. She went crazy. She said she'd teach me a lesson I'd never forget. Soft gasps rippled through the audience. The cameras zoomed in on his teary eyes. It was perfect television until Nadia stood. She didn't walk to the microphone. She walked to the very edge of the stage, closing the distance between her and the crowd. Her voice was low, but cut like glass. Every word you just heard is a lie. The moderator blinked. Ms. Righ, no, she continued, raising her voice just enough to command the room. You want truth? Let's have it. She turned toward Derek. You said you came to discuss business. Then why, Mr. Morello, did you bring 6 men carrying bats and tire irons? Derek's jaw tightened. That's not... According to your police report, Nadia interrupted, holding up a printed copy, you were unarmed. But I have 7 witnesses who saw you arrive with weapons. So, which story do you want to stick with? The one for the cops? Or the one for the cameras? A murmur swept through the crowd. Derek's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection. This is not a courtroom. The moderator hesitated, but curiosity had already taken hold of the audience. Let her speak, someone shouted from the back. Nadia smiled faintly. You want evidence? She reached into her folder and pulled out a small device. One tap, and the auditorium's speakers came alive with crystal clear audio. Derek's voice. Burn the place down. Make her scream, Vincent Morello's voice. Cold and calm. End it. I don't care how. She's a problem. Remove her. The room froze. Every reporter's pen stopped mid-stroke. Every camera zoomed tighter. Derek's face went pale beneath the bandages. "Recognize those voices?" Nadia asked, her tone surgical. "I do. I lived with them for months." In the back row, Vincent Morello stiffened in his seat, his jaw locking. The FBI agents disguised as attendees were already watching him closely. Nadia continued, voice now sharp as a blade. "My name isn't just Nadia Righ. I am Agent Spectre, formerly of the CIA Special Activities Division. For 11 months, I've been embedded here under federal authorization to monitor the Morello crime family's operations." Gasps erupted. Reporters surged forward. Derek's lawyer stumbled back, his face drained of color. "The hate crime narrative," Nadia said, pacing slowly, was manufactured. A PR weapon designed to neutralize a federal agent. Tonight, the truth is public. And you, she pointed directly at Vincent, are out of shadows to hide in. In perfect synchronization, a dozen FBI agents stood, flashing badges. The crowd roared as agents surged toward Vincent and his bodyguards. Derek tried to rise, but 2 agents were already on him. Nadia looked down at the trembling air of Detroit's underworld. "You wanted me on my knees," she said softly. "Now it's your turn." Flashbulbs burst. The sound of handcuffs clicked like applause. The room that had once cheered her downfall now erupted in thunderous ovation. And through the chaos, Nadia Righ, the ghost of Sector 9, stood perfectly still, finally visible, finally free. The night after the public takedown, Detroit's skyline shimmered with celebration. News anchors called it the end of the Morello Empire. FBI vans rolled through Sector 9. People clapped when they saw the words, "Thank you, Nadia," sprayed across broken walls. But Nadia Righ didn't celebrate. She knew men like Vincent Morello didn't die in handcuffs, and she was right. Just after midnight, a convoy transporting Vincent to federal custody was ambushed. The lead van was rammed by a garbage truck at full speed, flipping it like a tin can. Smoke, chaos, silence, then nothing. When agents crawled from the wreckage, Vincent was gone. The ghost had caught the devil, and the devil had slipped the net. At 2 a.m., Nadia's phone vibrated. Unknown number. She answered. Vincent's voice, rough and gloating. "You took my son. You took my name. Now, I take something of yours." The next sound was a sob, a young woman's muffled scream. Lena Torres. "The shipyard, Pier 17, 1 hour. No cops. You come alone or she dies. Let's finish this. Spectre." The line went dead. Ethan Cross arrived at her apartment minutes later, breathless, tie loosened, eyes full of panic. "Don't do it, Nadia. It's a setup. He's cornered, desperate." She loaded her SIG pistol, chambering around with the precision of habit. "Then it's a fair fight. You go there alone. He'll kill you." She gave a thin smile. "He's been trying to for months." And then she was gone. The Pier 17 shipyard loomed over the river like a rusted skeleton, cranes hanging like broken limbs, waves slapping against decaying pylons. The rain had returned, slicing through the dark in silver sheets. Nadia moved silently between shipping containers, her boots barely whispering against wet steel. "Come out, Spectre," Vincent's voice, echoed from the catwalk above. 50 feet up, he stood with Lena clutched in one arm, a revolver pressed against her head. 2 armed men patrolled below. Real killers this time, not street thugs. "You think you can erase me?" he shouted. "You think one speech fixes a lifetime of blood?" Nadia's eyes swept the ground. Barrels, metal stairs, puddles reflecting every flicker of light. She counted angles, exits, distances. One guard passed within range. A flick of her wrist sent a small steel ball, an improvised distraction device, bouncing across the floor. It detonated with a flash of blinding white. By the time the guard turned, she was already behind him. 2 strikes, one to the throat, one to the temple. Silent, efficient. The second came at her firing. She dropped, rolled, shot twice. 2 bodies hit the ground. Above, Vincent screamed, dragging Lena closer to the edge. "Stay back!" "I'll throw her." Nadia stepped into the open, rain plastering her hair to her face. Her voice carried, calm and sharp as a knife. "You won't. You're too much of a coward to finish anything yourself." His hand trembled. "You think you know me?" "I know everything about you," she said, advancing slowly. "You've been afraid since Serbia. You've been looking over your shoulder for the ghost you couldn't kill. Well, congratulations, Vincent. The ghost is here." He roared and pulled the trigger. The shot missed. Lena screamed, breaking free as Vincent stumbled back. Nadia surged up the stairs like a storm unleashed. The gun flew from his hand. He swung a crowbar instead. She caught his arm, twisted, and drove her elbow into his ribs. One more strike, a precise, surgical hit, and Vincent Morello collapsed on the catwalk, wheezing, broken, defeated. "I told you," Nadia whispered, standing over him. "This ends with me." Rain fell harder, washing the blood into the river below. Lena wept against the railing, shaking. Nadia holstered her weapon, took the girl's hand, and led her down. "You're safe now," she said softly. Behind them, sirens wailed in the distance, but the ghost of Sector 9 was already walking into the dark, leaving her enemies to drown in their own sins. Morning came to Detroit like a slow breath after a nightmare. The rain had washed the streets clean, and sunlight shimmered off the broken glass scattered across Sector 9. For the first time in years, the city wasn't whispering in fear. It was talking about Nadia Righ, the woman they had once called a monster, now hailed as the savior of a forgotten district. The fall of the Morello Empire hit the news like an explosion. FBI raids swept through every corner of Detroit, seizing hidden accounts, blackmail ledgers, and offshore properties. Vincent Morello's criminal network was dismantled in less than a week. Derek Morello, still bandaged and pale, agreed to testify against his father in exchange for leniency. In court, his voice cracked as he faced the people his family had terrorized. "I thought power meant fear," he said, "but she taught me that real power is protection." Nadia watched the broadcast in silence from the back of her cafe, a mug of black coffee in hand. The Rusted Leaf had reopened, but it wasn't the same cafe anymore. The bullet holes in the counter had been filled, the windows replaced, and the walls painted with murals of courage and unity. Above the door hung a new sign, the Rusted Leaf, Community Stronghold. Her once quiet little shop had become a symbol, a base for the people who refused to bow again. Jack Rayner, now walking without his brace, managed the security training sessions every Saturday. Lena Torres, alive and smiling again, ran free self-defense classes for local women. The neighborhood that had been choked by fear now stood tall, guarded not by guns, but by solidarity. Reporters still came daily, hungry for interviews. One asked, "Agent Righ, what's next for you?" She smiled faintly. "I'm not an agent anymore. I'm just a citizen who remembered what her hands were for." Behind her, the cafe buzzed with life, laughter, conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine. Sector 9, once the city's wound, was healing. The stand-up, strong movement, born from Lena's viral footage, spread to other cities. Small businesses started their own defense networks. Lawmakers passed new anti-racketeering reforms nicknamed Specter's Law. Across the country, people found courage in her story, the quiet message that one person's defiance could ignite a revolution. At sunset, Nadia walked to the river where it had all begun. The pier was empty now, the water calm. She tossed her old CIA badge into the current and watched it sink beneath the surface. For a moment, she saw her reflection, not as the ghost she had been, but as something living again. From behind her came Jack's voice. "You ever gonna rest?" "Maybe," she said softly, turning toward him. "But not while there's still someone out there who thinks fear is strength." They stood together, the skyline glowing gold behind them. Detroit reborn, one broken street at a time. Back at the cafe, a new mural had just been finished. It showed a woman standing tall amid flames, holding a book in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. Underneath were 5 words that captured everything Nadia Righ had become. Real strength protects, never destroys. The ghost of Sector 9 had finally vanished, but her legend was only beginning.